I could feel the weight of their stares even before I looked up. The room had shifted. Laughter that had once been warm now carried a sharpness I couldn't ignore. Claire's voice sliced through the noise like a blade, just loud enough for the crowd around her to catch every word. "Oh, come on, Mike," she said, her tone dripping with mockery. "You couldn't even put together a bookshelf without calling my dad for help. But I guess that's just you, huh? Always in over your head." Laughter erupted, a symphony of cruel chuckles that felt rehearsed, orchestrated by her. Claire basked in it, her smile wide, her gaze darting toward him, for approval. He gave her a knowing smirk, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place, like he owned her. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. Not yet, not here. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white, pretending I couldn't hear the whispers or see the pitying glances being thrown my way. But inside, something was burning. A low, steady flame that had been waiting for the right moment to ignite. I turned away, my jaw clenched so hard it felt like it might crack. I needed air. The walls of the banquet hall were closing in, the sound of clinking glasses and forced laughter growing unbearable. "Mike," a voice called after me, but I didn't stop. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me like a splash of cold water. For a moment, I just stood there, staring out at the empty parking lot, trying to steady the storm inside me. My breathing was uneven, my hands trembling at my sides. I'd spent years swallowing this, her little digs, her casual cruelty, the way she made me feel small in front of anyone who would listen. Tonight, though, was different. "Mike." The voice came again, closer this time. I turned to see Uncle Pete, his face lined with concern. He was a straightforward man, no patience for pretense. If he was following me, it wasn't to offer comfort. "You all right?" he asked, stepping into the glow of the parking lot lights. I didn't answer, just let out a bitter laugh. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Pete didn't smile. He shoved his hands in his pockets, his expression heavier than usual. "Because there's something you need to hear," he said finally. I narrowed my eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" He sighed, glancing back toward the hall as if deciding whether to go through with it. When he turned back to me, his eyes were hard. "Look, this isn't the time or place, but you deserve to know. People are talking about Claire. About Sam." My heart skipped. I'd heard those names together too many times, always in passing, always followed by Claire's dismissive wave. "He's just a friend, Mike. You're being ridiculous." But now, hearing them from Pete's mouth, the weight of those words felt different. He wasn't the type to stir the pot. If he was saying something, it meant there was more to it. "What about them?" I asked, my voice low. He hesitated. "They're saying Luke might not be yours." It hit me like a blow to the gut. I staggered back, staring at him, waiting for him to laugh, to take it back. But he didn't. "That's a lie," I said, my voice trembling. Someone's trying to start shit, Pete. You know how people are." He shook his head slowly. "I wish I could believe that, but there's been talk for a while now. I didn't want to bring it up, but after tonight, after seeing how they were." He stopped himself, as if saying it out loud would make it worse. I didn't want to hear more. I wanted to hit him, to shout at him, to do anything to drown out the voice in my head that was already screaming that he might be right. "I think you need to look into it," Pete said quietly, like it was the simplest thing in the world. But it wasn't. It was my life, my family, my son. And in that moment, as the rage boiled over into something darker, something colder, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to look into it. I was going to find the truth, no matter how deep I had to dig, or how many people I had to destroy along the way. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was overwhelmed with sadness or self-pity. Those feelings had no place in me anymore. What I felt was anger, a raw, festering rage that demanded answers, demanded justice. Pete's words echoed in my head like a broken record, each repetition fueling the fire burning in my chest. Claire came home late. I was already sitting in the living room when she walked in, her heels clicking against the floor, her perfume lingering in the air. She looked surprised to see me awake, but only for a second. Then she gave me her usual smug smile, the one she wore whenever she thought she'd gotten away with something. "Late night?" I asked, my voice neutral. I didn't want to tip my hand. Not yet. She shrugged, tossing her purse onto the counter. Wedding went long. You know how these things are. I nodded, watching her closely. Every movement, every expression. Did she even feel guilty? Did she have any idea that her little kingdom was about to come crashing down? "Where's Luke?" she asked casually, pouring herself a glass of water. "Asleep," I replied. Then, after a pause, "Claire, we need to talk." Her hand froze for a fraction of a second before she turned to face me. "Talk about what?" "About Sam. About the rumors." I didn't blink. I wanted to see her reaction, unfiltered. For the briefest moment, something flashed in her eyes. Fear? Anger? Guilt? But she covered it quickly, her expression hardening. "Rumors? What rumors?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "The one saying Luke isn't my son. That he's Sam's." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that isn't empty but heavy, pressing down on everything. Claire stared at me, her lips twitching as though she was deciding whether to laugh it off or deny it outright. Finally, she scoffed. "That's ridiculous. Who told you that? Pete? He's always been a meddling old fool." I didn't answer. I just kept looking at her, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. And then, slowly, I pulled a folder out from the side of the couch and placed it on the table between us. Claire's eyes flicked to it, and for the first time, I saw real panic creep into her expression. "What's that?" "A DNA test," I said. My voice was calm, but inside, my heart was racing. "Luke's." Her face paled, and she took a step back as if the folder itself were a threat. You did a DNA test without telling me? How dare you? How dare I?" I snapped, my composure finally cracking. I stood up, towering over her. "How dare you lie to me? How dare you humiliate me? How dare you bring another man into our lives and make me believe that boy was mine?" "Mike, you're being paranoid," she said, her voice trembling now. "This is insane. You're blowing some stupid rumor out of proportion." I opened the folder, pulled out the paper, and held it up to her face. "You want to see insane? How about 0%? How about scientific proof that he isn't mine? Explain that, Claire. Go on, I'm listening." She didn't even look at the paper. Her lips tightened, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. And then, to my utter disbelief, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a guilty laugh. A cold, unapologetic laugh that sent chills down my spine. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "You want the truth? Yes, Sam is Luke's father. Are you happy now? Happy?" The word was so absurd it almost made me laugh too. But the fire inside me burned too hot for laughter. "How long, Claire?" I asked, my voice low and deadly. "How long have you been lying to me?" She rolled her eyes, as if I were asking about something trivial. "Oh, get over yourself, Mike. It's not like you were ever a great catch. Sam, he's a real man. He knows how to handle me, unlike you." The words hit me like a slap, but instead of crumbling, I felt something shift. A cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about who Claire truly was, and it wasn't someone worth fighting for. I took a step back, folding the paper and sliding it back into the folder. "You think you've won, don't you?" I said, my voice calm again. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Won? Mike, please. You're not even in the game." I smiled, and for the first time in months it felt real. "You'll see," I said simply. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Claire, because when I'm done, you and Sam will wish you'd never met me." And with that, I walked out, leaving her standing there, her smug smile faltering. The game had just begun, and this time I was playing to win. The next morning, I woke up with one goal in mind: to set my plan in motion. The rage that had consumed me the night before had cooled into something sharper, more focused. Claire thought she could laugh in my face, reduce me to nothing, and walk away unscathed. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I started by calling my lawyer. "Brian," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need to know everything I can do to protect myself in a divorce, and I need it fast." Brian didn't waste time with small talk. "Are we talking assets, custody, or both?" "Both," I said, gripping the phone tightly. And I need to make sure she walks away with as little as possible. She's been lying to me for years, Brian. I've got proof. That got his attention. Proof of what? I hesitated, not wanting to say it out loud, but I forced the words out. Proof that our son isn't mine. She's been cheating on me with another man. I have a DNA test to back it up. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mike, Brian said finally, his tone cautious. That's a game changer, but it's also a loaded gun. Are you ready for what comes with firing it? I didn't hesitate. I am. Just tell me what I need to do. Brian walked me through the steps. Gathering financial records, documenting everything, and most importantly, staying calm no matter what Claire tried to pull. She's going to fight dirty, he warned. Women like her always do. I'm counting on it, I said. After hanging up, I moved on to the next step. Confronting Sam. If Claire thought she could humiliate me and let her lover walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. He had been laughing at me for years, and I wanted to see that smug expression wiped off his face. I found him at his office, a sleek downtown building that screamed, "Successful bachelor." When I walked in, he was sitting at his desk, scrolling through his phone with that same self-satisfied grin I'd seen too many times. "Mike," he said, looking up with fake surprise. "What brings you here?" I shut the door behind me and crossed the room, leaning over his desk. "We need to talk." His grin faltered slightly. "All right. About what?" "About Luke," I said, my voice low but steady. "And about Claire." The color drained from his face. He set his phone down slowly, his hands trembling just enough for me to notice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," I snapped, slamming the DNA test results onto his desk. "This proves everything. You're his father. You've been sleeping with my wife. And you've both been lying to me for years." He stared at the paper, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For once, the man who always had a snide comment or a clever comeback was at a loss for words. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, leaning closer. "You're going to stay away from Claire. You're going to stay away from Luke. And if you so much as breathe in their direction again, I'll make sure everyone in your life knows exactly what kind of man you are." Sam swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists. "You can't do that." I smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "Watch me." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The satisfaction of seeing him squirm was a small victory, but it was enough to fuel me for what came next. I wasn't done. The wheels were in motion, but I knew Claire wouldn't make this easy. She was too proud, too manipulative to let me walk away without trying to spin her web of lies even tighter. What she didn't realize was that I'd already cut through it, and I had no intention of getting tangled up again. The first crack in her facade came that evening when she found the folder on the kitchen counter. I'd left it there intentionally, open to the DNA test results, knowing she couldn't resist snooping. I heard her footsteps stop, the shuffle of paper as she picked it up. Then came the sound of her sharp inhale. She stormed into the living room, clutching the papers like a weapon. Her face was a mix of fury and desperation. "Are you serious, Mike?" she hissed. "You went behind my back and did this?" I leaned back on the couch, deliberately calm, and met her gaze. "I'm dead serious, Claire. I had to, since you've clearly been hiding the truth." She scoffed, pacing the room like a caged animal. "The truth? You're pathetic. Snooping around like some paranoid idiot." "Don't," I said, cutting her off. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of everything I'd been holding back. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. You've been lying to me for years. You let me believe Luke was my son. You let me raise him, while you—" My voice cracked for a second, but I pushed through it. "While you carried on with Sam behind my back." She stopped pacing, crossing her arms and glaring at me. "So what? You're acting like you're some saint, like you've never made mistakes." "This isn't a mistake, Claire. This is a betrayal. You built our entire marriage on a lie." She laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "Oh, please. You're no victim, Mike. You're just mad because you found out you're not as important as you thought you were." Her words hit hard, but I refused to show it. I stood up, towering over her now, and leaned in close. "You're right about one thing. I said, my voice cold. I'm not a victim, but you're about to be. Her eyes widened slightly, the confidence in her expression faltering for just a second before she masked it again. What the hell does that mean? It means I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said, stepping back and folding my arms. It means I know every cent in our accounts, every lie you've told, every dirty little secret you thought you could keep from me. It means I'm not playing your games anymore. She froze, her mouth opening as if to argue, but no words came out. For once, I had her cornered, and she knew it. And don't think for a second I'm letting you drag Luke into this mess, I continued. He doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of your lies. Her expression hardened, and she squared her shoulders. You think you can take him from me? Good luck. No court is going to side with you. I smirked. Maybe not, but they'll side with the truth. And I have plenty of that on my side. Her mask cracked then, her eyes narrowing as she realized just how serious I was. But instead of apologizing, instead of even pretending to feel remorse, she doubled down. You think you're so righteous, she spat. But you're not as strong as you think you are, Mike. You can't win this. I stared at her for a long moment, the woman I once loved now a stranger standing in my living room. Then I shook my head and walked past her toward the door. Watch me, I said over my shoulder before leaving her there, standing alone with the wreckage of her lies. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control. Claire wasn't one to back down without a fight, and I knew the next move would be hers. Sure enough, the storm hit just 2 days later, and she came at me with everything she had. It started with the phone call from my boss. Mike, he said, his tone cautious. I just had an interesting conversation with your wife. She's claiming you've been unstable at home, that you've got some personal issues that might be affecting your work. I told her that's not the Mike I know, but is everything okay? I gritted my teeth, gripping the phone so tightly it felt like it might snap in half. Claire was already trying to paint me as the bad guy, planting seeds of doubt wherever she could. It was classic Claire, strike first, go for the jugular. Everything's fine, Rob, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Just a messy personal situation. I'm handling it. Well, if you need time off. I don't, I interrupted a little too sharply. Thanks for checking in. I hung up and stared at the wall, the rage building again. Claire thought she could attack me where it hurt, threaten my job, my reputation. But if that was the game she wanted to play, I was ready to play harder. The second blow came that evening, in the form of a call from Luke's school. The principal informed me that Claire had come in, nearly in tears, claiming I was acting out at home and that she feared for Luke's safety. She asked us to notify her immediately if there were any signs of distress in Luke, the principal said, her voice dripping with concern. We just want to make sure everything is all right. It is, I said firmly. Luke is perfectly fine. I'm his father, and I've always looked out for him. Whatever Claire told you. Well, let's just say she has her reasons for wanting to twist the narrative. The principal hesitated, clearly caught in the middle, but I ended the call before she could dig any deeper. I'd had enough of Claire's sabotage for one day, but I wasn't going to sit back and let her keep throwing punches. It was time to go on the offensive. The next morning, I sent a message to Claire's closest friends, Lisa, Trina, and a few others I knew she regularly gossiped with. It was simple and direct, just enough to plant a seed of my own. Just so you know, Claire and I are going through something big right now. I recently discovered some shocking truths about our marriage, and it involves another man. I'd appreciate your discretion, but I thought you should hear it from me before she starts spinning her version of events. By mid-afternoon, the texts were rolling in. Trina was the first to respond, her curiosity practically dripping through the screen. OMG, Mike, what's going on? Claire hasn't said a word. Lisa followed not long after. Wait, are you serious? Who's the other man? I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. Claire had spent years using her friends as an audience for her twisted version of reality. Now they'd start questioning her, poking at the holes in her story. Let her feel the pressure for once. By the time I got home that evening, Claire was waiting for me. Her arms were crossed, her face flushed with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. Lisa called me today. asking if I was cheating on you. Do you know how humiliating that was? I dropped my bag by the door and met her glare head-on. Humiliating, I said, my voice calm but cutting. You want to talk about humiliation, Claire? How about laughing at me in front of all your friends at the wedding? How about lying to me for years about Luke's father? You humiliated me every single day of this marriage. All I did was give them a taste of the truth. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, she looked like she might explode. But then her expression shifted, calculated, manipulative. This isn't going to end well for you, Mike, she said, her voice low and icy. You think you're smart, but you're just digging yourself deeper. I smirked. Maybe, but at least I'm not digging alone. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. For the first time, she looked uncertain, and that was all the victory I needed for the night. Let her simmer. Let her plot. Whatever her next move was, I'd be ready. The tide was turning, and this time it was in my favor. Claire's uncertainty didn't last long. By the next day, she had regrouped, her claws out and ready to strike. She wanted to push me, to make me snap, but I wasn't the same passive man she had toyed with for years. I was playing a different game now, and I wasn't about to lose. Her first move came early that morning. I woke up to find my car's tires slashed, for perfectly even gashes in each one. Subtlety was not Claire's strong suit. I stepped back into the house, keeping my face neutral. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee like nothing had happened. Her eyes flicked to me, feigning innocence. Car trouble, Mike? She asked, her tone dripping with fake concern. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Nothing I can't handle, I said, grabbing my keys to her car instead. Her smile faltered. You're not taking my car. I turned to face her, matching her icy gaze. Watch me. I drove straight to a garage to have the damage documented, ensuring I'd have proof when the time came to use it. She wanted to play dirty? I'd make sure every one of her petty attacks left a paper trail she couldn't talk her way out of. But her next move wasn't petty, it was calculated. That afternoon, I got a call from Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report claiming I was emotionally unstable and a danger to Luke. The caller, of course, had remained anonymous, but we both knew who was behind it. The CPS worker arrived at my house within hours, a clipboard in hand and a tight-lipped expression. Mr. Hayes, she began, we've received a report concerning the welfare of your son. We'll need to conduct an inspection and speak with you and Luke separately. I wanted to scream, but I kept my composure. I had nothing to hide. My home was spotless, Luke was happy and safe, and I knew Claire's lies would crumble under scrutiny. When the worker left 2 hours later, she seemed almost apologetic. I don't see any issues here, she said, her tone softer now. We'll close the case unless something else comes up. I thanked her and shut the door, my fists clenched. Claire had officially crossed a line. Using our son as a weapon was something I could never forgive. That evening, I sat at the dining table with Luke, helping him with his homework. He was cheerful as always, oblivious to the war raging around him. As I watched him solve math problems, his little brow furrowed in concentration. The weight of it all hit me again. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting him from the chaos Claire had created. After Luke went to bed, I made a decision. It was time to move the chessboard entirely. I couldn't just defend myself against her attacks. I needed to take control. The first step was gathering more leverage. I reached out to an old friend, Josh, who worked in cybersecurity. He owed me a favor, and now I needed to cash it in. Josh, I said over the phone, I need you to dig up everything you can on Claire. Emails, texts, anything. Especially anything involving Sam. There was a pause on the other end. You're not messing around, are you? Not even a little, I said. Can you do it? Josh sighed. I'll see what I can find. Give me a couple of days. That wasn't all. I also reached out to Sam's wife, Melissa. She'd left him years ago, but I remembered enough from conversations with Claire to track her down. When I called, she was skeptical at first, but as I explained what had happened, her tone shifted. Let me guess, she said bitterly. He's still the same lying, manipulative bastard he was when I left. Worse, I said. I just thought you might want to know what's been going on. Melissa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I knew he was sleeping with Claire. That's why I divorced him. She thought she was so clever. Sneaking around. I caught them once. Let's just say it wasn't pretty. Her admission was like a gift. Another nail in their coffin. By the time I hung up, the pieces were coming together. Claire thought she could destroy me, but she had no idea how many people were ready to watch her fall. The storm wasn't over. It was just getting started, and I was finally in control of where it would land. The moment Josh called, I knew everything was about to change. "I've got what you're looking for," he said, his voice low, like he knew the weight of what he was holding. Emails, texts, photos. She wasn't exactly cautious. I sat at my desk, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "How bad is it?" Josh hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. Let's just say she and Sam were bold. There are messages going back years, plans to meet, jokes about you, even talk about keeping Luke's paternity a secret. They were sloppy, Mike. Real sloppy. I exhaled, my breath shaking. This wasn't just evidence, it was a complete takedown. "Send me everything," I said. Every single thing. When the files came through, I opened them with a mix of dread and anticipation. The first email hit like a punch to the gut. "Don't worry, babe. Mike suspects nothing. He's too busy playing the devoted dad to question anything. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Red heart." Attached was a photo of them together, arms around each other, at a hotel I'd paid for during one of our family vacations. The date on the email was over 3 years ago. Message after message, photo after photo. I pieced together the timeline of their betrayal. Claire had built her entire life with me on a foundation of lies, and Sam had been right there with her, laughing at my expense. But now I had it all, proof that neither of them could talk their way out of. That evening I called Melissa again. This time I had a proposition. "Melissa, I need your help. Sam thinks he can get away with this, but I'm done letting him win. Are you in?" She didn't hesitate. "Tell me what you need." With her help, I crafted a plan to expose them both in a way they'd never recover from. But I needed one more piece. A public moment that neither Claire nor Sam could escape. And I knew exactly where to make it happen. The following weekend, Sam was hosting a party at his house. A lavish, over-the-top affair he threw every year to show off his success. Claire had been bragging about it for weeks, unaware that I already knew she'd be attending. It was the perfect stage for what I had in mind. When I arrived, the party was in full swing. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and the crowd was exactly what I expected. Claire's clique of shallow friends and Sam's smarmy business associates. They didn't even notice me slip in. I spotted Claire near the bar, her laughter cutting through the room like nails on a chalkboard. She was leaning into Sam, her hand resting on his arm, the two of them completely at ease. My stomach churned, but I pushed it aside. Tonight wasn't about emotions. It was about execution. I waited until the room was packed, everyone gathered for Sam's toast. A tradition, apparently, where he gave a speech about his successes and thanked everyone for their loyalty. It was laughable, really, but I let him have his moment. When the applause died down, I stepped forward, raising my voice above the chatter. "I'd like to say a few words, too." The room went silent as heads turned toward me. Claire froze, her smile faltering. Sam's face turned pale, his confidence evaporating in an instant. "Most of you know me as Claire's husband," I began, my voice calm but loud enough to carry. "But what you probably don't know is the real story of what's been happening behind closed doors." Claire stepped forward, her voice sharp and frantic. "Mike, don't." "Don't what, Claire?" I interrupted, turning to face her. "Tell the truth? Expose what you've been hiding for years." I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers, the emails, the texts, the photos. "This," I said, holding them up, "is what you've been hiding. Proof of your affair with Sam. Proof that you lied about Luke's paternity. Proof that every single thing in our marriage has been a lie." The gasps from the crowd were almost deafening. Claire's face went red, then white, her hands trembling as she tried to grab the papers from me. I stepped back, letting them fall onto the floor for everyone to see. Sam tried to intervene, his voice weak. "Mike, let's talk about this privately." "No," I said, my voice cutting him off. "You don't get to talk your way out of this." You've been laughing at me for years, Sam. You and Claire thought you could humiliate me, take everything and get away with it. But not anymore. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady. These two built their relationship on lies and betrayal. And now, everyone knows who they really are. The room was a flurry of whispers, phones snapping photos of the evidence on the floor. Claire and Sam stood frozen, their perfect facades shattered. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, for the first time in months. Enjoy the rest of your party, I said, walking out the door without looking back. This wasn't the end. There was still more to do. But for now, I'd taken my first real victory. The world knew the truth, and they couldn't hide from it anymore. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing nonstop with texts and missed calls. Claire's friends, our mutual acquaintances, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them had something to say. The party's dramatic finale had spread like wildfire, and the truth was now out in the open. But I didn't care about the gossip. I cared about the next steps. Claire and Sam weren't just going to feel humiliated. They were going to feel the consequences of what they'd done. The first hit landed the next morning when Claire received a notice from my lawyer. She was being served with divorce papers. I'd made sure to include every piece of leverage I had. The DNA results, proof of her infidelity, and a petition for sole custody of Luke. If she wanted to fight me, she'd have to explain her actions in court. And I knew she wouldn't come out looking good. She stormed into the house later that day, slamming the door behind her. "You think you can take my son from me?" she screamed, her face twisted with rage. "Our son," I corrected calmly, standing my ground. "Or did you forget the DNA test?" Her face flushed with anger, but I didn't give her a chance to retaliate. "This is on you, Claire. You lied, you cheated, and now you're dealing with the consequences. Don't expect me to feel sorry for you." Her anger turned to desperation. "Mike, please," she said, her voice softening as she tried a different tactic. "We don't have to do this. We can figure this out. For Luke's sake. For Luke's sake," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "The only reason I'm doing this is for him. He deserves better than being dragged through the mess you created." She didn't have a response to that, just stared at me with a mix of hatred and fear. And for the first time I saw it, the realization that she wasn't going to win. Sam's downfall was equally swift. Melissa, his ex-wife, wasted no time spreading her own truths about him to his business associates. Combined with the chaos from the party, his reputation took a nosedive. Contracts were pulled, clients vanished, and within weeks, his success crumbled beneath him. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to salvage his business, but the damage was done. By the end of the month, his office was empty, and his house was listed for sale. He and Claire had underestimated just how quickly people would turn on them once the truth came out. As for Luke, I sat him down one evening, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had to say. He was too young to understand the full story, but he needed to know something. "Buddy," I said gently, "you're going to hear some things about Mom and me, things that might be confusing. But I want you to remember one thing. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." He nodded, his small hand gripping mine tightly. "I know, Dad." Those words broke something in me, but they also put me back together. Whatever else happened, I had to be strong for him. He was my son in every way that mattered, and I wasn't going to let Claire or anyone else take that from me. The divorce was finalized quickly. Claire didn't have the resources or the will to fight back after everything I'd exposed. I got full custody of Luke, the house, and the freedom to rebuild my life without her poison dragging me down. Months later, I stood in the backyard, watching Luke play with the dog I'd gotten him as a fresh start. The sun was setting, casting everything in a warm, golden glow. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Claire and Sam had tried to ruin me, but in the end, they'd only destroyed themselves. And while they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, I was moving forward, stronger than ever. Sometimes revenge isn't just about getting even, it's about taking back control, about showing the world that you won't be broken. And as I watched my son laugh and play, I knew I'd won in the only way that truly mattered.